Lands of the Abenaki people who were removed unjustly, and that we in this community are the beneficiaries of that removal. We honor them as we live, work, study, and worship here at CVUUS. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to CVUUS, Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. Welcome to those of you who are here today on this fourth Sunday in March, and welcome to those of you who are viewing the service today remotely. Here at CVUUS, we strive to be an inclusive and welcoming community that sustains a liberal religious tradition. We aspire to be visible and active on behalf of social justice and environmental responsibility. We nurture and empower each other at all ages on our spiritual journeys, and we reach out to the larger communities of which we are a part. As some of you know, March is very low on my list of months of the year in Vermont. It's actually 11th in appeal out of 12. It used to be in April, though. It's only accidentally in March, baseball season. Ravel points out it's baseball season this week coming up. Not the real games. Anything else? You want I'm doing my introduction here. You're welcome. Jeez, everybody's a critic. Where was I? Yes. But it's the beginning of spring and anticipates April in baseball season, when the natural world becomes all green, daffodils and tulips. And then May, the best month of all, number one. This time of year, March, it's good to invoke our Unitarian forebear, Henry Thoreau, who wrote in Walden, "The day is the epitome of the year. The night is winter, the morning and evening, the spring and the fall, and the noon is summer. These March winds, which make the woods roar and fill the world with life and bustle, appear to wake up the trees out of their winter sleep and excite the sap to flow." The sap is flowing. Let's hope we can find, as spring emerges and the natural world wakes up, the inspiration in our striking natural environment to carry on in a troubling world. It's spring. I'm Karl Lindholm, a member of the worship team, and I'm assisting this morning Reverend Tricia Hart, one of our 2 interim ministers, who is speaking to us today on Crossing Another Bridge, invoking the dramatic events in Selma, Alabama, 60 years ago this month that have come to be known as Bloody Sunday. It's a good time to silence your phone, if you haven't already. If you have a milestone or passage, a joy or concern you would like to share with the congregation, please fill out a yellow card. They're available out in the lobby. And drop it in the offering basket as it comes around. We also have pink cards out there if you would like the help of the Caring Network, and blue sheets if you are visiting so we can be in touch. Do join us for coffee hour in the Ann Ross Fellowship Hall after the service. Let us worship together. Now, please read along with the words in your order of service or on the screen as Katie lights our chalice. There it is. Thank you, Katie. Symbol of light and knowledge, symbol of warmth and freedom, we light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love.
Our call to worship this morning was written some decades ago by Thomas Merton. Anybody know who Thomas Merton is? Oh, good. Think monk, think silence and activism at the same time. An amazing thinker of our time. He wrote this: "We are living in the greatest revolution in history, a huge spontaneous upheaval of the whole human race. Not a revolution planned and carried out by any particular party, race, or nation, but a deep elemental boiling over of all the inner contradictions that have ever been. A revelation of the chaotic forces inside everybody. This is not something we have chosen, nor is it something we are free to avoid." Let us sing together. The hymn is number 18 in your gray hymnals. The words, of course, will be up here. Song, and please stand if you're willing and sit if you want. It's all good, but please do sing. What wondrous love. Julia is right there. All right. I have a question for the children first. What's this a picture of? Do you know? Katie, who? And who was Rosa Parks? Rosa Parks was indeed an activist for people of color. And where'd she live? Do you know? Well, actually, hang on a second, because Gwen might know. Where'd she live? She's on a bus. She's on a bus. And hang on one second, I know you know, and I hate to make you not say it, but let's see if any of the grown-ups know. So why is there a picture of Rosa Parks on a bus? Okay, you need to speak up. She's not in the back. Well, so? It was Montgomery, Alabama. It was Montgomery, Alabama. And there was a law in Alabama which dictated where people who were not white had to sit in the bus, right? And Rosa Parks did not agree with that law. Lots of other people didn't either. So, Katie, tell us, what did she do? What did Rosa Parks do? It's actually the front rows of the bus was the law, and you could sit there if you were a black person, as long as there wasn't anybody else sitting there, and as long as the bus driver didn't tell you you had to move. Rosa Parks sat down, and when she was told to move, what did she do? Amaya, what did she do when she was told to move? She sat right down. That is actually not, there wasn't a photographer there that particular day, but we can believe that it looked something like this, with her saying, nope, I'm not moving, thank you. So, was that a big deal? How big a deal was it? A pretty big deal, pretty big deal. It led to a lot of things that happened. And I actually don't remember quite when I first heard that story, but I asked Julia, and she does remember. Where did you hear about this?
Not until college. Yeah.
Say more.
So when I was in middle school, we had Martin Luther King Day, so I knew who Martin Luther King was. I knew who Rosa Parks was, but I did not learn about the bus boycott. And I learned about it first in a government class in college, in the context of voting. Because, does anybody know when black people in this country got the right to vote? It's kind of a trick question, gonna be honest.
Rosalie knows.
Oh, Rosalie. Yes.
In a way, it was
In a way.
1965.
It's a trick question because black men were given the right to vote in the Constitution in 1870. That's when the 15th Amendment was ratified. And black women technically in 1920, when we have the 19th Amendment. However, they couldn't actually vote. Does anybody know what the laws were in place? In many states, there's like a general term used for the group of laws that stop them from voting.
Well, it was during Jim Crow. What was the name of the law, though? Boy, we could do a government class here, which would be cool. The laws, the rules were about signing up to registering to vote, and I'm actually blanking on the. I will give you an example of one of the questions that if you were a black person in Alabama, you might get asked in the 1950s or 60s in order to qualify to register to vote. Here's the question. You maybe know the answer to this. How many bubbles are there in a bar of soap? Yeah, kind of like that. Kate just said, what? Yes. an impossible question. So, a whole sequence of events came from that. And anybody know what year that was? Actually, that was 55. The bus boycott was 1955. Okay, the next slide. Okay, who's that? Dr. King. And it's Dr. King in Montgomery, Alabama, toward the beginning of his pastorate. Okay, here's a question that isn't a trick question, but you may not know it. This was his first church, the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery. How old was he when he went to Montgomery to take over that job? Anybody know? 26. He was 26, yes. And he was, and I cannot tell you exactly what month it was, but I'm thinking it was August. It was in the early fall, kind of when ministers start. And does anybody know when Rosa Parks, what day Rosa Parks chose to not move in the bus? What month it was? Katie, do you know? Well, pretty much. It was in December. It was in early December. So this picture is of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talking to other activists in the city of Montgomery and talking to other clergy and sounding like he knew, he looks like he knows exactly what he's telling everybody we should do, right? He looks in charge. He's not quite 27 in that picture. And a question that I never really thought about until I was in seminary was, how did he get chosen? How did he get chosen as the minister in Montgomery who was going to lead the other black clergy and the black churches? Anybody have a guess about why he got chosen? I mean, nobody knew him. He was 26. That's why, because he was new, and because he hadn't made the enemies yet, and because everybody knew, the other clergy knew what an enormous job this was going to be, because they had planned for it. And some of the other clergy were not able to take over that job because they had other jobs that they were doing that they needed to show up for, and King didn't. And maybe he was chosen because some people thought he would fail, because that can happen sometimes, but he did not. He did not fail. Okay, next slide. Okay, what's this? Rosa Parks is being fingerprinted. And what kind of a person does she look like she is in that picture? Smart. Yep. What else? Strong. Does she look scared? No. Yep. What'd she look like, Gwen? She looks brave. She does. She also looks really well dressed. She was a seamstress, and she was a very classy dresser. So it was pretty shocking, and that, of course, was the point, to see this picture of this very brave, classy, well-dressed woman being fingerprinted in the police station. Okay, what have we got next? Slide-wise? So, yeah. So here's a question. Two questions. How long did they plan to have a boycott? The idea was these bus laws were unfair and ought to be changed. People have been saying that for a while. Nothing happened. So what did they decide to do in order to force the point? You know this. Have a boycott. A boycott means that the people who were in favor of changing the law would not ride the buses. A lot of the people riding the buses were black people. Something like 17,500 black residents of Montgomery took the bus normally every day. And so they planned this boycott. And how long did Dr. King and the other clergy think it was going to last? Do you know this question, Julia?
I don't know for sure what he thought. I think probably not as long as it did.
Definitely not as long as it did. Anybody know how long it did last? Rosalie? It was actually almost 13 months. It was over a year. Yep. And they initially planned to have it last a week. But they hoped it would last more than one. They actually hoped the first day would work, but then they hoped it would last longer than 1 day. But it kept lasting and kept lasting. And the reason it could is because they found other ways for people who would ordinarily ride the bus to get to work. And those were primarily carpools. A lot of people walked, but some people couldn't walk that far. And so they organized carpools. So why would you have to organize a carpool? I mean, we do this all the time, right? It's easy to organize a carpool. Actually, it's not. It's not, and especially not every day. Right, right. And various things happen to make it really difficult for black people to give rides to other folks. The city said, oh, no, you can't do that. You have to be a taxi in order to do that, and you have to charge a minimum fare. Sorry, I know too much about this story. I'll stop. But the minimum fare for taxis in 1955, you want to guess? 55 cents, 45 cents, 45 cents. Way too much for people, because I think the bus fare was a nickel. So, but they did it anyway. They found ways to do it. And if we go to the next slide, does anybody know who Georgia Gilmore was? Artley does. What do we know about Georgia? She was a cook. She was professionally a cook, and pies especially, yes. So she organized an effort that she called Pies. It was called the Committee from Nowhere and Pies from Nowhere, because anytime anybody asked her, who is organizing this, she would say, I don't know. They just come from nowhere, because people who were helping out might have gotten in trouble. But why did the food and the pies matter? To raise money, because all these people who were driving, other people, needed money for gas. And there were meetings, and there needed to be food for that too, but it was primarily about raising money. And Georgia, who, there's a wonderful book about her, and I bet, is it in the library, Artley? Yay, it's in the library. So you can check it out, was one of the people who, nobody asked her. This was not part of a plan. She just figured we're going to need food, and we need to raise money, and we can do it. They're wonderful, wonderful stories, and we can learn from all of them. Julia, do you want to say anything else before we?
I mean, she also did some really cool stuff afterwards too. So if you don't know who she is,
actually say that. Yes.
Well, I don't know. I don't know the exact names, but she was actually a lead plaintiff in several lawsuits that moved other parts of the civil rights movement forward.
She testified on behalf of Martin Luther King Jr. once or twice. She had activist meetings in her house.
Yeah, and she cooked out of her house. So when they were doing this, imagine all these ladies coming over to her house cooking. Yep. So they probably were, having fun, maybe singing while they were cooking, just give you some color. So yeah, look her up if you haven't.
Yeah. So, is it time?
I think so. Should we sing the children out?
I think we should.
Okay.
Yeah. in ways that you already know everything about, and some things that maybe you have never tried before. And mostly, would you just make me feel better? Oh, Ann Webster's already doing this. Just turn your order of service over so that you can see the list, because I'm not going to talk about all of these, but there are a lot of opportunities for you to get involved and do something once, or to get involved in a more lasting way. First of all, I want to say that right after that, or at noon today, there's the first of 2 new to UU classes. You perhaps have signed up for that already. If you would like to come and you haven't signed up, or you'd like to know more, where's Mike? You can you just stand up for a second? Tell Mike, talk to him about it. That'd be great. Foster family circles happen once a month here. Today is one of those Sundays. And let Tom and Morgan know. You could stand up, Tom. If you can help with the youth from the foster families in Fellowship Hall while the adults meet here in the sanctuary. There are ways of meeting and eating together and hiking. And I just want to highlight the fact that in a couple of weeks, Reverend Fred Small is going to be here. Some of you know Fred. He's an amazing musician, a climate activist, and he's going to do the service on April 6th, and there's a workshop after it. So all the information you need is right there on the back of your order of service. This is a busy congregation of people who've been here a long time and people who are just arriving and everybody in between. It is a community that is attempting in very real ways to live its values, our Unitarian Universalist values. And one of the ways that this congregation does that is by taking up a collection every week during the service, which not only reminds us that the congregation exists because of its people and your generosity, but also that we give away the money, half of the money that we bring in to help an organization, usually in the community, that is doing the work that our values tell us is absolutely essential. And this month's beneficiary is the Atria Collective, which creates a safe space for those who have experienced violence. Their goal is the elimination of physical, sexual, and emotional violence through direct service, education, and social change. Your gift today will help to support the Atria Collective. This morning's offering will now be most gratefully received.
This is from Neely Jennings, it's given to me this morning by Julia. Neely and Connor's younger son, Rory, had emergency surgery this morning to remove his appendix. The surgery went well. He's 5. The surgery went well, and he is in recovery, and they would appreciate thoughts and prayers. From Tom Morgan. Grateful to let you know that the UUA has invited me to present a webinar at our UUA General Assembly in June on the community justice ministry we developed here in our community of communities. Thanks for all of you who have been so supportive. And from Marnie Wood, a beautiful and lovingly supportive service honoring our longtime member, Marjorie Carson, was held here yesterday afternoon. Reverend Tricia was wonderfully present, helping all of us. Ronnie Romano collected approximately 21 singers to share the absolutely stunning favorite piece, Des Ratons, that Marjorie loved deeply. It's probably Latin. After family members were so grateful for their kindnesses that helped them share a beautiful farewell to their beloved matriarch. And also from Marnie, what a fun Friday evening at our March game night. Great food, totally interesting games, lots of laughter. We were 28 or so, truly enjoying the evening together here at CVUUS. And no doubt there are milestones and passages and joys and concerns that remain unspoken, but reside in our hearts and minds.
We do this little ballet to slide the crate in and out for out of the way for tall people and in the way, in a good way, for not as tall people. So if you wonder what we're doing back here, that's it sometimes. I have a poem, prayer perhaps, to read you, and then as we join each other in some times of quiet, meditation, prayer, whatever your tradition teaches you, we will join in some quiet together. But before that, a piece called Beyond Sight by Rosemary Watola Traumer. All around me, the world was normal. People eating dinner or walking down the street. But my world? Some massive, invisible hand kept capturing me, then tossing me into the air. And I'd somersault and fall and be caught, then placed upright again on the ground. All night, it went on like this. I'd be walking, and then I'd be flying, and then I'd be falling, and then I'd be caught. Until finally, by morning, we couldn't say that it wasn't disconcerting, but we could say I had become more fluent in this strange upheaval. We could say I had begun to trust the same hand that tossed me would catch me. We could say that when I woke up, I was still myself and nothing felt the same. And though my feet never left the ground today, I was tossed, and then I was caught. Even now, I almost feel them around my chest, those great fingers, as they set me on my feet again. Let us rest in the not quite silence we make together.
trumpet sound to wake the nations underground, looking to my God's right hand. When the stars begin to fall, my Lord, what a morning. Oh, my Lord, what a morning. That's my Lord, what a when the stars begin to fall, you'll hear the sinner cry to wake the nations underground, looking to my God's right hand. When the stars begin to fall, my Lord, well, my Lord, what a morning. Oh, my Lord, what a morning. Well, when the stars begin to fall, you'll hear the Christians shout to wake the nations underground, looking to my God's right hand. When the stars begin to fall, my Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. Yes, my Lord, what a morning. When the stars begin to fall. Amen.
I was excited on Tuesday at our preparation meeting when Tricia explained what her sermon would be about today, what she would be speaking on, and I was naturally thought of the days, the two times I had been to Selma, Alabama, and I agreed to do a brief, very, very brief introduction or reflection before the sermon. It wasn't going well. I actually started early, which is unlike me. And I was having the problem that Twain had once when he said, I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead. I was going on and on, not saying very much, and I was working on it this morning when Brett took out the dog. And I said, I don't have anything, I don't have much to say. She said, tell them about Aparius. We have a slide, I think, for this one. Yes. And I went to Selma on two occasions, most recently, actually 10 years ago, on the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, the month of Bloody Sunday, March. But I was there for another purpose. This fellow who you see in the painting, is William Clarence Matthews, was born in Selma, Alabama, and he's been the focus of my academic life, probably, discovering about him and his importance. He was a baseball player. And I contend that he was the best baseball player in the country, best college baseball player in the country in 1905 and the 2 or 3 years before that, too, at Harvard College, which had the best baseball program in the country at the time. He was an unusual fellow. He was born in Selma. That was hence my interest in going to Selma. I wanted to find out more about him if I could at the library in Selma, which is pictured there, the Dallas County Library, and wanted to walk the streets 100 years later, or many 150 years later, 20 years later, just to get a sense of what Selma was like and see what my imagination could do with it. And the Paris story that Brett suggested I write really brings to light, I think, the Selma of then, which is echoed in many ways today. Sam Aparius was the best baseball player at Georgetown University during the same years Matthews was at Harvard. He was the captain of their team. He boycotted, we heard that term earlier today, he boycotted the games with Harvard. He wouldn't play them. He wouldn't come to Cambridge. He wouldn't play in the game when Matthews went to Georgetown. Then, in the summer after Matthews finished at Harvard, his 4 years at Harvard, Matthews played in Vermont for the summer in the Northern League, which was a very fast independent or outlaw league. He could play in an outlaw league because he was black. And so my contention is that this man, this great player who we should have known about as a wonderful baseball player in the history of the game, was precluded from playing at the highest levels because of his race. As it turns out, Sam Aparius was playing for Montpelier Berry in the Northern League when Matthews was playing for Burlington. That's my friend Molly Hawley, who did a rendering of Matthews in his Burlington uniform in 1905. Did I mention Sam Aparius was from Selma? So here you have these, in one relationship, you have sort of the dramatic tension of the era, of the century, of the country. That's the Aparius story. Now, second slide, please. How many have been to Selma? Oh, a lot. Okay. Selma is famous in many ways for the march from Selma to Montgomery, 54 miles along Route 80. But what happens now, and you come in on Route 80, then you hit a bypass, and then you connect to Route 80 up above it. Route 80 just bypasses Selma. In fact, when I went there the first time, I couldn't find Selma. I knew I was in it, but I couldn't find the road, wasn't marked, off the bypass where there are hotels and, subways and so on and so forth. Drove into town, eerily quiet in Selma. The main drag, Broad Street, big Broad Street, which was there in the 1870s when Matthews was born, where Matthews' father worked in a drugstore as a tailor and a handyman and lived in the shacks of the black people behind the drugstore. He was a tailor, as I said, a handyman. Today, Selma has about 17,000 people. It's still about 80 to 85% black. It's one of the poorest places in Alabama, which makes it one of the poorest places in the country. I naturally, in the previous slide you saw me, I gravitated toward, after I spent the day in the library, I gravitated toward the Civil Rights Memorial Park, which is just adjacent to the Edmund Pettus Bridge. As you go over the bridge, there's the park, and it's a lovely spot. It has sculptures and memorials to those who participated in the marches. The bottom one, you can see these plaques, probably about 5 feet high. The first one is Hosea Williams, the minister who led the march. The next is John Lewis, whom we all know from his service as a representative to the government for almost 40 years. He was 25 years old then at the march, a civil rights activist. And then there are the two women, Amelia Boynton Robinson and Marie Foster, who were civil rights activists and are called the mothers of the march, the mothers of the movement. I sat there. I had no revelation. I had no epiphany. I knew I was on hallowed ground. I sat there for about an hour in a very serene and tranquil atmosphere. I was the only one. This was in March of 65. I was the only, not March of 2015. I was the only one there. I contemplated things, and then I climbed in my rental car and drove to Montgomery, where I was hoping to work, where I did work the next day at the archives, the Alabama archives. So that was my trip to Selma, which is a high point, but not a very dramatic time for me. So I'm really keen to hear the context that Tricia will provide for us today of the meaning of the march, Selma to Montgomery, 60 marches ago, 60 months of marches ago. Thank you.
It's all right, it's a ballet, right. So as Karl said, this month of March, is the 60th anniversary of everything, actually, not just Bloody Sunday, but everything that happened in March of 1965 in Alabama, a lot of it in Selma. The fact that it was a decade after the Montgomery bus boycott is not coincidental. It's interesting that it took 10 years from that to the time when there was then there was an awareness that you could change the laws about buses. You could do little things. But unless you actually dealt with some of the issues, especially around voting, you were not going to change the country. So I went to Selma 10 years. I guess you and I were there at the same time. Karl, I didn't know you then, sorry. In 2015 for the 50th anniversary. And if you would put up the first picture. So the 50th anniversary of the march, the beginning of the march from Selma to Montgomery, looked like that for a very long time. Lots and lots and lots and lots of people on that wide avenue that Karl was talking about. Selma is a quiet place frequently. It was not a quiet place that weekend. I was there the day after President Obama had been there, but there were still lots of important people. And I like to march by myself rather than with a group of people, because I feel like that I already know. I feel like I can learn more. And that was a good idea as I tried to figure out what I should look at until the moment when I was pushed, not off the road, but to the side. And I thought, what the heck is going on? And I looked, 10 people to my left toward the center of the street. And Jesse Jackson and his entourage were traveling in the middle of the street, just pushing, as you need to do, and in order to keep the people around him, and in order to, because this was not a happy event. It was a celebratory event without being happy, if that makes any sense. It was tense. And so once I realized it was a Jesse Jackson, essentially, that was pushing me, I was all right with that. There's one more picture that Dorothy's going to show you. I can't remember who I handed my camera to, but I thought I need some, record of the fact that I was here. The march which was the point of all of the protests that month of March, was a march to Montgomery. And you all know why. Montgomery is the capital. And this was a march to go call on the governor. Anybody remember who the governor of Alabama was at that point? George Wallace. Montgomery, Alabama, which is the heart of the Confederacy, which tore this country apart in an effort to sustain laws that made it legal to enslave people, that wanted to enforce racial divisions, that stole freedom and dignity and safety for people from people of African descent in our country in every way. Montgomery, Alabama, which is also the heart of the civil rights movement, especially in the 1950s and 1960s, and now again in many ways. It was an undeniable force at that time, whose goal was to end segregation and discrimination and violence and injustice that kept people of African descent separate and subjugated and never safe. These are not small distinctions we're talking about. The goal of the civil rights movement was to make freedom and equality real for everyone. Make freedom and equality real for everyone for the first time in our country's history. I know you all know this, but sometimes it's important to say those words out loud. I've been thinking a lot about all of this, in part because of what's happening in our country now, not just in Alabama, but everywhere. I've been thinking because it feels like things are changing and not necessarily in good directions. I've been thinking about it because I keep learning more chapters of this story, a whole lot more than I knew as a child or as a young adult, despite my wonderful and very expensive education. Learning more than I knew when I went to seminary, where I had the great good fortune to study with Pastor Kirk Byron Jones. Do you know Kirk Jones? Oh, you would love him, Francois. You would all love him. Who is, at the time that I was in seminary, 1,000 years ago, Kirk was finishing his PhD in the work of Martin Luther King Jr. So we were getting the stuff directly, which was amazing. And I've been thinking about all of it since January of this year, just a couple of months ago, when I was in Montgomery, learning from the work of the most remarkable Bryan Stevenson. You all know who Bryan Stevenson is? Founder of Equal Justice Initiative. Okay, those of you who don't know who he is, would you do me a favor? Would you like to say to yourself, I'm going to look him up. His name is spelled B-R-Y-A-N, Stevenson. So he's a remarkable man. He has created 3 sites, large, one's a museum, one's what do you call it? A recognition of the more than 4,000 people who were lynched in this country. And the newest one is an outside beautiful park, which you're going to have to go to all of these, Tom. I know that you will when you're there in May. But the third and the newest one does the best job I've ever seen of incorporating issues around indigenous people and Africans, enslaved people, and the role that the South played in that history. All of this has and is continuing to change Montgomery, that place where Rosa Parks started it all, except, of course, Rosa Parks wasn't the beginning. And the march from Selma to Montgomery, which did finally take place, wasn't the end. None of these were isolated incidents. I just want to give you a few dates, because I didn't know them until I looked them up. The quest for racial justice started after the Civil War, but long before 1955. And it is still going on. The Civil Rights Act, did you know there was a Civil Rights Act in 1875? That was the first of the Civil Rights Acts in 1875, which was in response to the response to Reconstruction, which led into Jim Crow. Civil Rights Act of 1875 was stripped of most of its power in 1883 by the Supreme Court. Other things happened in the decades after that, but when you get to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, you see a series of things, legislative actions, that US presidents did to attempt to bring some fairness into the system. FDR created the Fair Employment Practices Commission. Truman had a presidential commission on civil rights. Eisenhower passed the Civil Rights Act of 1957, which finally restored some of what had been lost by the 1883 ruling. And when John F. Kennedy was in office, he tried very hard to pass a Civil Rights Act, to try to pass meaningful legislation, and it was all filibustered. One of the filibusters went on for 72 days. So, even though in 1963, while Kennedy was in office, we of course had the March on Washington. In 1964, when Johnson was the president, he did, in 1964, pass that Civil Rights Act, which was good and didn't really deal with voting, not sufficiently. Johnson knew that, everybody knew it. Okay, so the voting thing, I don't need to explain to you why this is important. You know that. The situation in Selma is almost, well, in Alabama, but Selma was a focus point because in that particular county there was an especially impossible, as I was saying, how many bubbles are in a bar of soup, I don't know. Black people outnumbered white people in Selma at that point. The voting rolls were 99% white. By the early 1960s, there were more and more protests. They were accelerating. And there was a precipitating event to Bloody Sunday and the march that happened in February of 1965. A 26-year-old man named Jimmy Lee Jackson. Do you all remember hearing about Jimmy Lee Jackson? He had tried to register to vote, failed every time, 5 times. He was determined to make a change in the law. He was in a protest. After the protest was done, Jimmy Lee was chased by some police in that town. He ran into a cafe. The police followed with their guns, and Jimmy Lee Jackson was shot. He was lying on top of his mother, whom he was protecting. He did save her life. He did not save his own. He died 8 days later. So the anger about that led to what became known as Bloody Sunday. Just to remind you, it's Sunday, March 7th, 1965. 600 people had been gathered by people like Amelia Boynton and and John Lewis and other local people. Martin Luther King was not in town yet. 600 people walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and they were stopped and attacked violently by the police, some of whom were on horseback. The police were armed with guns and tear gas and clubs. But here's what was different. For the first time, a major US television network, ABC, was showing a movie that night. The movie was Judgment at Nuremberg. Lots and millions of people were watching this film, and for 15 minutes, they interrupted the movie to show footage from what happened in Selma. And it was horrible to watch. And millions of people watched it. And then they went back to the movie, but not unchanged. Not unchanged. So it's known as Bloody Sunday, not only because it was bloody, but because the whole country got to see it. That was March 7th. On March 8th, Martin Luther King sent out telegrams to clergy groups, denominations all over the country, and said, come to Selma. And many people did, including many Unitarian Universalists. There are so many stories about that, but lots of them were there. And on March 9th, Martin Luther King, now in town, led hundreds of people across the bridge. And they stopped. You've heard about this? They stopped at the end of the bridge, and Dr. King knelt, and everyone else knelt, and they prayed, and then they turned around and went back into the city. It's a bit of a mystery about why he did that. And most likely it was simply because they didn't have any guarantee of police protection for this march. But he didn't want to do nothing. So what happened was that a number of the clergy who had come to town went out to dinner after this turnaround march. One of them was James Reeb, who went out to dinner at one of the few integrated restaurants in Selma. And as you probably know, the three of them were attacked by men when they came out of the restaurant. And James Reeb was hit on the side of the head with a 3-foot club. Injured very seriously. He was taken to the hospital, though the trip to the hospital was much longer than it might have needed to be because there was no hospital in Selma that would treat him. And 2 days later, on March 11th, he died, James Reeb. On March 12th, Dr. King sent telegrams again to denominations saying, come to Selma. And the UU version of the response to that is really wonderful. The UUA board was meeting in Boston, and they got this telegram that was brought to them. I mean, I know what 25 Beacon Street was like. I can imagine the person who got the telegram going up to the 3rd floor and handing it over, and they decided right then and there to suspend the meeting and to go to Selma. So they got on buses and planes and trains and they went. So you may be getting the sense, because Selma is not a big place and it is not a wealthy place, wasn't then, isn't now, a lot of people were in Selma. It was very crowded and very tense and dangerous because people could be attacked, all kinds of things could happen, and maybe this famous march is never going to happen because the only way it could happen would be if the governor of Alabama, remind me who that was, asked for help for federalized troops to guard the marchers. And Lyndon Baines Johnson, incredibly clever guy, met with Governor Wallace, who showed up kind of unannounced and uninvited in Washington, but they had that week, and Johnson got Wallace to ask him. As long as Governor Wallace was asking for help, then it was not the U.S. Army coming in and invading the South again, which was important. All of that happened, all of it happening at the same time, and in reading, I've brought books here in case you want to take a look at them. The idea that in addition to everything else, Johnson was getting briefings about the Vietnam War, which were just devastating and secret, and he's talking to Martin Luther King, he's talking to Mrs. Reeb, he's trying to manage all of this. But on March 15th, he decides, President Johnson decides, this is the moment for the Voting Rights Act. Sorry. If there was an event, the culmination of it, it's not Bloody Sunday. It's the passing of the Voting Rights Act, which we now lament is not the powerful legislation it was, and yet it did get passed. And it got passed partially because on March 15th, Johnson addressed a joint session of Congress. And 2 days later, the Voting Rights Act was passed. I don't know whether any of you have heard about Doris Kearns Goodwin's latest book. She's a historian. We've all read her writing about Lincoln and other things. Well, she wrote this book about her husband's experience, Dick Goodwin. He was a speechwriter. And he was the man who in one day, in the morning of March 15th, comes into the office, he's a White House staffer, and is told that he has to write the speech that Johnson is giving that night. And he said, you could have given me a little more time. Anyway, it's an amazing story of how he writes it. But Doris Kearns Goodwin does an interesting thing. She says, you know, if you read this speech, it's not about a lawyer telling you what's in the bill. It was, she says, a credo of who we are as a nation and who we are as a people. A redefining moment in our history brought forth by the foot soldiers of the Civil Rights Movement. Johnson said, and forgive the gender non-inclusion in this, the real hero of this struggle, he spoke, is the American Negro. His actions and protests, his courage to risk safety and even to risk his life have awakened the conscience of this nation. He has called upon us to make good the promise of America. And who among us can say that we would have made the same progress were it not for his persistent bravery and faith in American democracy? So while the speech is being finished and Johnson is approving it, that very afternoon, Dr. King had been invited to be at the Capitol, but he can't because he has to be giving the eulogy in Selma for James Reeb, which he did without any text at all, no speechwriter for Martin Luther King. This is a little bit of what he said, Dr. King. What killed James Reeb? James Reeb was murdered by the irrelevancy of a church that will stand amid social evil and serve as a taillight rather than a headlight, an echo rather than a voice. He was murdered by the irresponsibility of every politician who has moved down the path of demagoguery, who has fed his constituents the stale bread of hatred and the spoiled meat of racism. But then he went on, Dr. King did. He said, one day the history of this great period of social change will be written in all of its completeness. On that bright day, our nation will recognize its real heroes. They will be thousands of dedicated men and women with a noble sense of purpose. So Doris Kearns Goodwin is reading these two things said on the same day, set against one another, and she realized that at the same moment that President Johnson was extolling the heroism of black foot soldiers from the South, Dr. King was eulogizing the bravery and courage of the young white minister from the North who had given his life for black voting rights and freedom. Yes, sir, a Unitarian Universalist minister. One of two people killed that week. The other, Viola Liuzzo, also a Unitarian Universalist. So in our time, in these days and months and years that we are living in, there is so much uncertainty and so much fear of what will happen next, and frustration that our leaders, our political and our cultural and our religious and our intellectual leaders, the influencers, haven't figured out a plan that people, different kinds of people, can believe in or try to achieve or change or throw out for something better. It feels like our country, to me anyway, it feels like everything is caught in a whirlwind of chaos and hate and untruth. And unlike that poem, I don't have an assurance of being caught and set down on my feet again. I'd like to have that, but it's all moving too fast. So it helps me to remember that other times, not so distant, when so much was happening all at once, with no clear plan and no clear outcome, times like 60 years ago in Alabama and Washington, D.C., when against all the odds and amid terrible tragedy, deep wells of faith in humanity and whatever larger forces hold us brought something good into the light. And people, lots of people from many different places made that happen. And Unitarian Universalists were right at the center of it. Our tradition found itself for that important moment in the vanguard, and I'm so proud to say we screwed up a lot, but we did not flinch. In pursuit not of political victory, but a victory for humanity, and support of communities that uplift people and live out values of justice and love and freedom for all. That time transformed us, and it keeps on transforming me, and perhaps you as well. And there is, I think, hope and faith in that. We have done it before, and we can do it again. So may it be. Let us sing. Let us sing. Song you didn't know before, but we're going to sing it again. That's a good one. It's a good one. And I did change the words to the last verse, so yeah, next time. Closing words from Rebecca Parker. Your gifts, whatever you discover them to be, can be used to bless or curse the world. The mind's power, the strength of the hands, the reaches of the heart, the gifts of speaking, listening, imagining, seeing, waiting, any of these can serve to feed the hungry, bind up wounds, welcome the stranger, praise what is sacred, do the work of justice, or offer love. Any of these can draw down the prison door, hoard bread, abandon the poor, obscure what is holy, comply with injustice, or withhold love. You must answer this question. What will you do with your gifts? Wait, I think I need to say, so bless us all. That's a little bleak. Let us speak our words together as we extinguish the chalice.